Hello everyone, my name is Robert Sears. I am the Assistant Professor of Trumpet at West Virginia University, and I'm really excited to spend some time with you sharing some approaches to the blues. And many of us begin playing the blues probably in high school. We have some sort of, we're in a jazz ensemble and we're asked to improvise over a 12-bar blues. And oftentimes the only tools that we may be given are some blues scales, maybe some other lines that potentially can sound decent. And I'm going to show a couple different approaches. We will talk about the blues scale. We will talk about a variety of approaches that are tangible in my opinion and can help both the educator, the student, and frankly the performer out there to give you more ideas to work on this wonderful art form that we call jazz, and specifically to focus on 12-bar blues. So let's go ahead and jump on in. We're going to first start with some common blues progressions. So if you look at the very top, a simplified blues progression is what you see in front of you, and this is all in concert pitch. And what you'll notice, right, is there are really only 3 chords. We're in the key of B flat, so that very first chord that we have we would call the 1 chord. Then we go to the 4 chord, which happens to be the 4th scale degree of B flat. Back to the 1 chord, to the 5 chord, which is the 5th scale degree of B flat. Back to the 4 chord, and then to the 1 chord. And we hear this progression often in a lot of older blues. We hear this in popular music as well. The Spider-Man theme song, believe it or not, is this progression. And Neil Hefti's Batman theme is also this progression. And not to mention, we hear, like I said, a lot of older blues with lyrics that share this 12-bar form. And I'm going to play it for you on the piano. Forgive me, I'm not the world's greatest pianist, but this will give you an idea of the progression that you've probably heard in a lot of music. Sounds something like this. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, and... Okay, so this is a very common progression, and just at the outset of everything we do today, I just want to invite you that if you feel like you are getting lost as far as knowing where we are in the form of the blues, I would invite you to sing the bass line. I'll be honest, I think everyone has experienced getting lost in a tune before as we learn and grow in this wonderful art form that we call jazz. And so there's no shame in going back to simplicity and singing the roots. So if you're following along at home or in a classroom, I would invite you to sing the roots as we play through the rest of these different variations. So let's look now at variation number 1. You're going to notice just more chord changes, right? Just right off the bat, we go to the 4 chord a lot quicker in the 2nd bar. And then we have this chord progression that leads us to the 4 chord. We would call this a 2-5-1 of E flat. So 2-5-1 going to the 4 chord. We go back to the 1 chord, and then we have this D minor G7. D happens to be the 3rd scale degree of B flat, and G the 6th. So we call this a 3-6, 2-5, C being the 2nd scale degree of B flat, F being the 5th scale degree of B flat, and then we return back home to 1. And we have this turnaround. Notice it's very similar to what we just had. We just eliminate the D minor, and we just start in the G. So it's 1, 6, 2, 5. Very common progression. It sounds something like this. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, and... All right, were you humming along? Were you singing the bass line? All right, if not, join with me on this next one. Now we're going to do variation number 2. Again, this is another common way to approach 12-bar blues. And you're going to notice it's very similar to what we just did before, with the exception of this 6th measure. We go to an E diminished 7th, which really works well for the bass because we walk up from an E flat 7, up a half step to E, and then the bass goes to an F. And if you see slash chords like this, what you have on the left side is the harmony that the piano, guitar, vibes, or whatever your harmonic instruments happen to be in your band, that's what they're going to play. What's on the right is what the bass is going to play. So the bass will be playing an F, while the harmonic instruments will be playing the chord on the left. And it works really nicely. We get this walk up in the bass chromatically. Then it's the same as what we saw previously, except till we get to the end. Instead of going to the B flat 7, we're going to go to a 3, 6, 2, 5. Really just going to repeat the last couple measures there again in somewhat of a harmonically sped up way. Okay, so here's variation number 2. Hum along to the bass if you can. 1, a 2, a 1, a 2, a 3, and... Alright, so these are very common progressions that we find in the blues. Alright, we're now going to jump on over to phrasing 101. So, when we listen to older style blues, we'll often find either the lyrics or the melody to be very similar between the first 4 bars and the second 4 bars. And you see I've labeled it as A for the first 3 bars, and there's rest. And then there's another A idea for the next 3 bars, and then there's a little bit of rest. This is very common. And then the final last 4 bars tends to be a different melodic statement or a different set of lyrics. And then there's some rest. But honestly, just for the sake of an example, you could have some lyrics that might sound like this over the A. Today I lost my dog and I feel so sad. Then there's some rest. Then the next 4 bars would be, today I lost my dog and I feel so sad. And there's some rest. But the B theme or melody could be, but I got my baby so everything is okay. You'll find lyrics of this sort, and I know it's a little silly, but there are some good principles that we can learn from this. When we're soloing or improvising on our instruments, we can actually take a melodic figure and play it for the first couple of measures, leave some rest, and then play that same idea again, leave some rest, and then play a different idea. And there's just a tradition of phrasing in this manner, and it sounds good, and 2, it feels good as well. So we're going to talk about some sounds that we could use to generalize playing over the blues and help us kind of get into this AAB phrasing. Now, many of us are probably familiar with the blues scale, which you see in measure 52. Okay. Now, some of us might not be familiar with the minor pentatonic. But they're very similar. The only difference, if you look closely, is there's no E natural in the minor pentatonic scale. Okay. But they're essentially the same thing, just we have different terms for them. And here's the sound of the minor pentatonic. Now the blues scale just has 1 extra note. Okay, those sounds are very strong, and they can be used the entire time over the form of the blues. Now, a lot of us have already tried this and have done this quite a bit. You will find that after a while it will get exhaustive and it doesn't work endlessly. In theory, it can, but our ears do get tired of hearing it after a certain amount of time. So we have to be judicious in how we use it, okay? And we'll talk about ways to use it and then some other options that give us variety in our playing. Another one that maybe some of you haven't considered is the major pentatonic with flat 3. Now, if you see measure 56 below. And FYI, there are measure numbers in here because they correspond to handouts that are made for every instrument. So for C instruments, B flat instruments, E flat instruments, and instruments in F. So even French horn can be involved in this as well. So The major pentatonic. What is the major pentatonic? Well, if I speak digitally or just by scale degrees, the major pentatonic includes the first scale degree, second, third, fifth, and sixth. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. Sounds like this. And in fact, if you want to remember this forever for your whole life, it's all the black keys on the piano. Okay, that's the major pentatonic. And what we're going to do is we're just going to slip a flat 3 in there, a lowered third scale degree, and it sounds like this. Okay, it gives us some more options, and this is another sound that we can use to generalize chord progressions quite a bit. We just have to be careful at times with that major third, because when we're playing the blues, there are some chord changes where that won't work so well, and I'll show you where that would be. But these are some generalizing sounds that can help us get into this AAB phrasing that we learn from lyrics and older blues recordings. All right, so let's talk about this generalizing of sounds again. And I want to show you some idiomatic sounds that are all derived from the minor pentatonic or the blues scale. And I've written them out there for you. These are not the be-all, end-all sounds. These are jumping off points to help you or help your students learn some sounds that will work, again, and that are derived from the minor pentatonic and the blues scale. But that don't always just start from the root, go up and go back down. That is the pitfall of young players. They want to start at the bottom, they want to go up, and they always want to return to the root. Well, I'll tell you what, if you do that all the time, it gets tiring, and it doesn't sound very refreshing. It can be used for a time, so you want to be careful that we are kind of being creative with how we're utilizing these sounds. So I'm going to show you what some of these sounds sound like, or so what these sound like. You're welcome to play along with me. Okay, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Next 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Next 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. Next 1, 2, 3, 4. Next 1, 2, 3. Here's measure 99 now. 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay, so all of these sounds will work, and they stem from, like I said, the minor pentatonic and the blues scale. Now, there are some extra notes occasionally added in. If you look at 97, right, there's this A natural, and you're going to say, what is A natural doing there? Well, the simplest answer I can give is that it works and it sounds good. And if it sounds good, then utilize it. You're going to notice that not everything fits precisely into a box, but general principles are being gleaned from what you see above. Okay? Or what you see from the minor pentatonic and blues scales above. That's what I mean. Now I want to show you how I can include some of these sounds in an improvised solo. And again, I'm going to phrase in the manner which we discussed just a few minutes ago with AAB. I'm going to take an idea, play it, leave some rest. Take an idea, play it, leave some rest, and I'm going to play a new idea for the last 4 bars. And for the sake of this example, I'm going to take an idea that stems from measure 88 and 89, or sorry, 89 and 90 as my A idea. And then when I get to measure 90, and then when I get to the last 4 measures of the form, I'm going to play measure 99 as my contrasting idea. Okay? Let's hear what this sounds like. 3, 4. Some rest. I'm going to say it again. I just changed the ending subtly. Here's measure 99. Okay, so I can just phrase in that manner. Take an idea, leave rest, take an idea, say it again, leave rest, then say something different. All right, and now I'm going to generalize with the major pentatonic flat 3, and this sounds like this. So that's the scale, and here are some idiomatic sounds that we get that utilize this scale in a variety of different ways. Here's that 102. 1, 2, 3. And I want you to notice how not every one of these sounds fits so nice and neatly into a box, right? There's mixing and matching of blues or minor pentatonic and blues scales and the major pentatonic flat 3, and that's what we see in measure 105. It goes down as a blues scale, it ascends as a major pentatonic. All right, so you can mix and match, create new ideas. Here's 107. A 1, 2, 3. 2, a 3. These sounds are derived from this major pentatonic with the flat 3. And I can utilize these sounds when I'm playing an improvised solo. But like I mentioned before, we have to be careful because the D natural or the major third will conflict with our 4 chord, because the 4 chord harmony is E flat 7 and there happens to be a D flat in that change. So we have to be careful that we're not playing the D natural over the E flat 7 that has the D flat. Otherwise, it's going to cause some problems. All right. So here's an example of a gospel influenced sound that is derived from the major pentatonic with the flat 3. And I call it the 6-1-1-1 sound. Why is it the 6-1-1-1? Well, the idea is based around the 6th scale degree of B flat, or the key that you're in, and then 1-1-1. This sound is very common, and I'm going to show you how I can utilize this in my playing. So you don't always have to feel tied to the minor pentatonic. There are other sounds out there to use, and they're not too difficult to execute.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, so I played the 6-1-1-1 idea, and then I included this sound right here in 124, and then I played something that derived from the minor pentatonic. Okay, so I broke away. I wasn't as, nice and neat with playing AAB this time, but the whole motives up until here were all influenced by this major pentatonic with a flat 3. Okay, so just some other options. And again, this 6-1-1-1, it's really mobile, which means it's really easy to transport this into other keys because you really only have to worry about the 6-1 and the flat 3. Okay, there's another sound that I want to share with you. It's what I call the 4-3-4-3-4-3 idea, or if you're good with solfege, the fa-mi. Fa and solfege is the 4th scale degree, mi is the 3rd scale degree. And I say it's a floating idea, and by that I mean it floats over the rhythm. Okay, it's not locked in 100% to the grid. It can be. It can be right in time, but oftentimes it floats out of time. Gene Harris, wow, the master of floating out of time and just sounding so expressive. Oscar Peterson, Trio, if you listen to the album Night Train, it's the one with the purple cover. You can find this online and elsewhere. There's a number of slower blues, and he does just a beautiful job of floating out of time and then floating in time, going right back into the pocket in his improvisation. So I want to share this idea with you, and the sound is this. Okay, so I'm not 100% tied to playing all of the triplets, but that's kind of the general aesthetic or rhythmic feel that exists when I play this idea. Okay, now something we have to be careful about is that this D natural, like we've talked about before with the major pentatonic flat 3, if I try to play this D natural over this chord, that's not going to sound good. There's going to be a conflict with that D flat. So if we want to play this idea over these chords here, we've got to make sure that we adjust that D natural to a D flat. Okay, which is very easy to do. All we do is change one note, and then it becomes. Okay, and then we rock back and forth between those two notes. Now, this line fits really great over the last 4 bars because there's no, contradicting harmony. Let me show you now how we could implement this. So I'm going to improvise in an AAB idea. And for now, I will purposely place this as my B contrasting idea. Okay?
1, 2, 3, 4.
I'm going to say it again. Okay, so I played a major pentatonic flat 3 idea for the first 4 bars. I played a similar line to what I played at the beginning, the next 4 bars, left a little bit of rest. And then I played this fa mi floating idea, but I didn't come out of it just normally. I went up and then I played a minor pentatonic or blues scale kind of way to get out of this sound. I hope you're kind of seeing that not everything has to be so rigid, but you can practice these. And you can say, all right, I'm going to force myself to play this idea twice, and then I'm going to play a new idea. And that may be hard for some of you initially. We have to be listening and being aware of what we're playing. We're not just pressing fingerings down or valves down or whatever it is, the instrument that we're playing. We have to be listening to what we're doing, be aware, and be able to repeat it. Okay, so those are some sounds so far. All right, now we've discussed generalizing harmony, right? Now we should get into more of the nitty-gritty, what I call actually being aware of where the half steps exist between one chord change and the next. So what I've done here is I've highlighted the 3rd and 7th chord tones of each chord. Sometimes the 3rd is on the bottom. It starts that way, 3rd, and then the 7th on the top. But then it rotates at times, where I have the 3rd on top and the 7th, flat 7 on the bottom, because I want to show that there is some good half-step motion that exists. D to D flat, A flat to G. Okay? Now I'm not going to go into all of the nitty-gritty of what every chord means in minor and dominant chords and diminished at this time. But I want you to note that there are great half-step intervals that exist throughout the blues form, and in fact throughout any change playing that you do, and you want to be able to identify them and play them. So all I'm going to do now is I'm not going to be as concerned with my AAB phrasing for the moment, but I'm going to play a solo where I'm just going to be primarily focused on resolving by half step from one chord to the next. and I'm going to play with the rhythm. So I may play, you know, some longer valued notes contrasted by some short valued notes. My whole goal, again, is nail the half step differences that exist between harmony and play with the rhythm and see what ideas I can come up with.
3, 4.
I'm playing the top line first. I'm gonna play the bottom now. So I primarily stayed with notes on the top the first time around, then I primarily stayed with notes on the bottom the second time around. And you just be surprised at the mileage you can get by just playing the guide tones. I would encourage all students and all teachers to well, not just encourage, but tell them it is necessary to know where the half steps exist in the blues. Because I can only play those generalizing sounds for so long until the listener becomes tired and until the jazz musician questions whether the student actually knows the changes. So this is going to be the next step. It's going to be valuable. Okay, we can go further than this. So now we can include all chord tones 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. Now you might ask, why are you including the 9? Well, because it sounds good. Seriously, it's as simple as that. I'm including the 9 because it sounds good. And with the harmony that we're dealing with, the 9th will always work. So we could play through the changes here, and my recommendation would be for the student to make sure that they are landing on chord tones at the beginning of each measure, or towards the beginning of each measure. And I'm just going to add a word of caution that landing on the root continuously lacks color and spice and flavor. While it can be done, it should be done somewhat sparingly, because there's more color in the 3rd and in the 7th and in the 9th. Okay, so I'm going to now switch gears and look down at the bottom where I have shell written with 3, 7, and 9. You might question, what is a shell? Well, this is like the shell of the harmony. Sometimes we call this shell voicings. And you're going to notice with just 3 notes, you can get a rich sound. So I'm going to play this on the piano. I'm going to play each one of these voicings down the octave, or just a few of them for time's sake. It sounds just like this. In fact, this is not a bad requirement for all students in a class, or even for the pianist to be able to play 3, flat 7, and 9. And as you get better at this, you could make your voice leading work better. I've done it everything where the 3rd is on the bottom, but you could invert some of these voicings so that the pianist doesn't have to be jumping around the keyboard so much, but the lines would be more connected and stepwise. All right. What I want to share is now you can solo over this by just kind of landing on 3rds, 7s, and 9s. And I'll show you what that could sound like. And again, this is not the be-all, end-all way. This is just an idea to open a student's or your own personal approach to thinking about where you could resolve.
1, 2, 3.
I'm going to start in the 9s. So I was just kind of hanging in the 9s. Wasn't really doing too much creative, but just hanging on those sounds, and notice that they sound good. And you might question what I did at the end. Well, I did somewhat of a turnaround. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But just note that ninths are good. They're good resolutions. You can sustain on them, and they will sound nice. All right, another thing that's important to note is that we can respell any 5 chord, any dominant chord, as a minor 2. Now, you might say, what are you talking about? Well, hang with me for a minute, okay? Sometimes people get lost when I explain this, but if I have a B flat 7, as we see in that very first measure, we're going to call this a 5 chord. If we're saying it's a 5 chord, we're saying that B flat is the 5th scale degree of some scale. Okay, I wonder if you can figure out what that is. Let's imagine B flat is the 5th of some scale. Well, I'm going to help you. B flat, A flat, G, F, E flat. E flat would be the 1, and B flat would be the 5, which means that the 2nd scale degree would be F. And if I make an F minor chord, guess what? F minor 7 and B flat 7 contain all of the same notes. They do. So I commonly refer to this F minor being the sister 2 chord. It's related to the B flat 7. Okay? They have all of the same notes. Sometimes this is easier to visualize if you're thinking of a piano. If you have a G7, which only contains white keys, G is the 5, C would be the 1, and D minor would be the minor 2. So if you look at the keyboard, if you can imagine that, or if you want to look at one, D minor contains only white keys, and G7 only contains white keys. So that sister 2 and the 5 chord can be used interchangeably used. Okay, and so this also occurs in our playing here. If we have B flat 7, we can just think F minor. And the cool thing is that if you look, if I'm up on the F minor, I'm sitting on the 5th of B flat, the 6th of B flat, or the 13th, we call it oftentimes in jazz. I'm sitting on the A flat, which is the flat 7, B flat is the root, and C natural is the 9th. So we're kind of sitting in the upper area, and it has some nice colors to it. So I've written out all of the minor 2 respellings, and you can see they're labeled beneath. So I'm going to play solo, and I'm going to stick only now to these notes. So check this out.
1, 2, 3, 4.
I did not play a single note that does not exist in that minor respelling. And you can get a lot of mileage out of this. Believe me, this will help you in many situations. This doesn't just apply to the blues, it applies to all change playing. If you have a dominant chord, you can think a related 2 chord or the sister 2 chord. If you have a 2-5-1 progression, which is what this is the 2 of E flat, and that's the 5 of E flat. You can just sit on that 2 chord the entire time. All right, now we're going to talk about how we can alter the 5 chord with minor respellings. Now, this works the best when you have 2-5-1 progressions, like we have here, this F minor, B flat 7 to E flat 7. This D minor to G7, it's a 2-5 going into C. And we could do it at the end, C minor to F7 that goes back to B flat. We could also do the same minor respell here if we wanted to. But here's the principle. You take the 5 chord from a 2-5-1 progression, you go up 1/2 step, and you play the first 5 notes of that minor scale. This scale can be extended, but that's a conversation for another time. Let's keep it very simple. and we're just going to play the first 5 notes of minor 1/2 step above the 5 chord. And this is going to put us into a lot of altered tones. I'm not going to go into the specifics of all the alterations that we're playing, but for now I want you to know that it sounds good, and as long as you resolve to that next chord by half step or by step to a chord tone or to a note that fits from a chord tone perspective, it's going to work very well. And let me show you how this can be done when soloing.
1, 2.
I'm going to stick to these minor respells. Alright, so I stuck very specifically just to these minor respells. And if you're wondering what I played 5, 3, 2, 1 here. It's a very strong sound. Beep, ba, da, dee, da, da. On this one, I kind of went up and down, and then I resolved to the G natural. And on this one, I did the kind of similar idea that I did here. I went 1, 5, 3, 2, 1, something similar to that. And it's a very strong sound. You can do this again on any 2, 5, 1. Go to the 5 chord, play minor up 1/2 step. Finally, we've talked a little bit about harmonic specificity, right? We have these 2, 5, 1 progressions that you'll see that are put in red. And there are other ways to play these than just only playing minor. We can outline the chords more clearly with arpeggios, with scales. And I'm going to show you some very basic outlines. 3 different outlines that can be used when playing over these progressions. Okay, outline number 1, 2, and 3. These are basic outlines that have been taken, that have been gleaned by someone by the name of Bert Ligon. And his analysis of a lot of jazz transcriptions has yielded that if you boil down a lot of the great jazz musicians' lines, they can be boiled down to their simplest forms, and some of the simplest forms are what you have in front of you. Outline number 1. Notice how outline number 1 goes up in arpeggio and goes from the flat 7, resolves to the 3 of B flat, and goes down in a scalar manner. Outline number 2 starts on the flat 3 of D minor, goes down in a scalar manner, resolves to the natural 3, and keeps going. It's the same ending as this one, but this one just happens to start on the flat 3. Notice this starts on the root, this starts on the flat 3. And this one here is a little confusing, but if you want to replace this F7 with C minor and put an F7 here, you would see that if we're thinking C minor for this first 4 notes, it starts on the 5th, goes down the arpeggio, lands on the 3 if we had F7 right here, goes up the arpeggio, then lands on the 5th. And they sound like this. And they outline the harmony very clearly, and I want to show you how this would work. So you could improvise around this, and then you insert these lines.
2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, so I inserted those lines. You will note, if you're paying real close attention, I did alter one of the notes. And one of the notes that I altered was this one right here. This can be an A natural or an A flat. You can make this a natural 9 or a flat 9. This goes for all of these. This C natural could be it's the 9th of B flat, right? The second scale degree and 9 are the same. It could be C natural or C flat. I could play this, if we're thinking in the key of F here, this is the 9th, or the second scale degree. I could play this as G natural or G flat. And I've given you a whole slew of 2-5-1 language that takes these outlines and then alters them and manipulates them in a variety of different ways. That sheet is included for your use and for your practice. It's not the be-all end-all as well. And you can create your own lines, and I highly encourage you to do that. But what I want you to note is what makes these lines sound strong are the 7-3 resolutions, which is the guide tones. Flat 7 here to the 3. Flat 7 to the 3. Flat 7 if we're thinking C minor in this area to the 3, which is the 3 of F7. So simplicity is king. And again, these can be adapted and manipulated a ton. All right, let's review what we've discussed so far today. We've talked about different variations that exist in our blues progression for 12-bar blues. We've looked at phrasing from a lyrics perspective with A, B. Remember, you have an A motive, you have some rest or leave some space. You state that A idea again, leave some space or rest, and then you play a new idea, a B idea, and then leave some rest or space. We talked about sounds that generalize the harmony, such as the minor pentatonic, the blues scale, the major pentatonic with flat 3, and the 6-1-1-1, which is that gospel influence sound. And remember, that gospel influence sound, in my opinion, is derived from the major pentatonic with flat 3. We also discussed the Fa-Mi floating idea, or the 4-3-4-3 idea. And remember, with both the major pentatonic flat 3 and the Fa-Mi, we have to make sure that we are paying attention to the chord of the moment, because if we get to the 4 chord and we land on the major third, we're going to have issues. All right, and then we also talked about approaching the blues by looking at the chord tones, looking specifically at guide tones, the thirds and the sevenths. We also talked about how ninths could be places of resolving. They had nice color. We can resolve to ninths and hang on them, and they'll work just fine. We also talked about minor 2 respells, right? A dominant 5 chord equals a minor 2 chord. They share all the same notes. They just give you a different vantage point, and they force you to be in a different register of that 5-7 and kind of expose you to new sounds. We also talked about how we could alter our 5 chords by playing the minor 2 1/2 step above the root, right? We just went over that. And then we talked about 2-5-1 progressions. And again, there's a whole handout on how you can take those basic 3 outlines and adjust them significantly to give you a number of different options. All right, I'm sure there are questions. If you have any, please don't hesitate to reach out to me at my email here. Also, you can reach out to me on my website. It's been a pleasure to be able to share this with you, and I hope you find this helpful.